Welcome to Talent Take 5. I'm Andrew Sterling, and today we're diving deep into the art and science of building world-class biotech teams with someone who's done it 60 times over. Joining me today is my friend Chris Robinson, Chief Talent Officer at Third Rock Ventures, where he doesn't just recruit for biotech startups, he literally helps create them from scratch, with the biotech industry facing unprecedented challenges, regulatory chaos, funding shortages, and a massive talent gap. The companies that survive will be the ones that get their people strategy right from the start. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, before we dive into talent strategy and some hot takes, can you share just a bit about your journey and getting into biotech and the VC space?
Sure. I guess my journey started 25 years ago, as I entered initially into tech recruiting, and I found myself saying, this is interesting, but I don't find it that impactful. And my background is in biology and physiology from an education standpoint, and I really wanted to utilize that. So I ultimately was at a boutique search firm and helped build an R&D division for that, which was focused on pharma and biotech. And then I spun out from there with a partner and built a boutique search firm focused on translational medicine, which led me into the last 15 years at Third Rock, building out management teams and companies across the board in venture capital. So my firm, Third Rock, has been around for 19 years. We've launched up to 70 companies now.
Wow, 70 now. Great.
70 now. We've raised $4.3 billion to do that as the initiators. We're a little unique to the system. I guess we were the first venture firm to come out and really tell the world we are a bunch of physicians and scientists, business people that are going to take a lot of biological risk on and try and build transformative companies. But we're going to do it with the know-how of people who have done it in the past, meaning the founders of Third Rock were the founders of Millennium Pharmaceuticals, Mark Levin, Kevin Starr, and Bob Tepper. And so they really believed that if you hired the right team and you stripped down the bureaucracy that sometimes comes with larger companies, and you had more of a think tank engine, you could conceptualize your own companies and take tried and true leaders who have discovered transformative medicines, put them not only ideate, but build the team around that ideation, launch it as the financier, and then go into it as the management to build strong pillars underneath it, so that when you did hand it off to other people to scale it, that you would have de-risked it to a point, you would set up potential partnerships and future funding sources, and there would be a level of value creation there. And so I guess we started that trend, and now it seems 20 years later, everyone else is claiming they do that as well.
Well, the innovation has been ongoing for you guys, and it's been exciting to watch all the success and the growth. But we're kind of pivoting into a different time, and the market has shifted a bit. So, looking at 2025 and some of the priorities or challenges, what are you seeing as some of the biggest talent challenges right now that are unique to launching a biotech and scaling a biotech in 2025?
Yeah. The biotech industry itself came off of a decade's worth of a bull market, expanding growth, where we had a lot of tailwinds, interest rates being low. The investors were willing to pay for the innovation cycle. You had kind of everything going for you, and there was an appetite for it. So our industry grew exponentially, which created the supply and demand issue. And now we've shifted into the bear market, right? And there's a constriction. Let's say there's probably around 900 public biotechs right now. Some would say the industry should probably be less than 500 public biotechs. And, a lot has changed, right? Dramatic change over the past 2 years, where we had investors willing to pay and companies were holding valuations that were early stage biotechs based on their potential, right? Well, the switch flipped and now people want to see the data. They do care, but they want to know, right? We put billions of dollars into the innovation cycle. And at the end of it, we have a certain amount of drugs approved, creating revenues for companies and making money for investors. The true hurdle here is, does it work in humans, right? So there was
Absolutely.
lots of what we call product engines and platforms, novel technologies moving forward, but they were moving forward in mice and rats and primates, not in humans. And the rubber meets the road in humans. Proof of principle in a human being is I'm not sure, we use mice a lot, but I'm not sure there's a correlation with what happens in mice, quite honestly, with humans a lot of the time. So the challenges we face, we have probably at least 200 biotechs right now in the public market, public domain, that have negative enterprise value, meaning they're trading below cash. There's a tremendous amount of constriction, so consolidation and or companies seeking strategic alternatives, which in other words means we're running low on cash and we need to land this ship somehow, whether that be in a reverse merger or something other, fire sale of the technology, which is, unfortunate, but that is where we are. The challenges are somewhat, I guess, monumental right now. There's so much headwinds. So everyone is trying to figure out how do you right size a biotech when you grow it? And what we're finding, before we were growing, before we had the data, because the money was there, the generalist investor was in the market and there was an appetite for it. So there's no longer an appetite for it. So now, which is more reasonable and pragmatic, is grow based on data, right? Don't grow based on just because the capital's there. Overgrow, overspend, buy nice space and spend lots of money on capital equipment, overhire. And that did happen. I think there's a lot more people on the market per se. So some have come to me and said, your job must have gotten a lot easier. Just because there's more people, it doesn't mean they're the right people.
Yep.
And we talk about this. We want leaders that are ready for war, not for peace, right? We're in a wartime era in our industry right now where everything is up against the wall. And if you don't have grit and resilience as a leader and have an ability to pivot off of original strategy, you are going to pigeonhole yourself and be in a bad position. So
Well, it's a moving target in a constantly evolving landscape. We have some hot takes to dig into. The first hot take: science is easy and people are hard. So I know some science is very hard, but
yeah, I laugh at that just because, well, science is, I would argue that there is nothing harder than human biology and trying to figure it out. And then the people equation, the same can be said for people, right? People, human beings are a complicated species, and building a team where you have complementary skills and cohesiveness is where we get the best output. There's a lot of scientific ideas, and I would say the best ideas are matured by the best teams. And I've learned that directly, just to give you some, I guess, data around it. I have worked on over 100 project teams at Third Rock, and been involved with 65 of our 70 company launches, pre-formation and then post-launch. And I will tell you the one thing I've picked up on, or I guess the two things. I have not seen a linear path yet, what we wrote in a pre-formation Series A launch deck, and what actually plays out in a company. Meaning science is very difficult. There's lots of challenges, unpredictable things happen with science, and the science breaks, right? What I would tell you, the direct correlation is that our best, most cohesive teams across all of the project teams and company launches I've worked on have had our better outcomes, right? And so I tell people this when I talk to them about what they're going to do next, right? And I focus heavily on executive recruitment and board builds. I would say that the pharma and biotech industry, and maybe people will argue with me, but the data will support what I say. We still, even with all of the money and investments that we have done, not just Third Rock, but our whole industry, we're still not great at picking what works in human beings. We spend tremendous amounts of money, $2 billion on average, 10 to 12 years to get one drug approval, 90% failure rate, right? So it's an amazing stat. So I tell people, I will bet on people before I will bet on the next great shiny toy that someone tells me is going to transform the world or make the best treatment, right? I've heard that thousands of times from really smart people, and the data supports what I'm saying, right? Like, bet on the people, bet on the teams. They will have better outcomes. Now, there's some luck and serendipity, whether you pick the right indication to work on, whether the
For sure.
financing of your field was there and ready for you, or if you're in a down or up market. But again, I would side with picking the best leadership teams that it can inspire the rest of the team and get the most productivity out of those teams time and time again. And so, I hear too many times people will come and say, but the science, it's so great. And I was like, well, the people around the table around the science, are they sophisticated biotech builders or are they not? Do they have a track record of success? Have they made drugs? Right? Because if you look at our bull market years, there was a lot of companies that were being formed straight out of academia with really smart people. And I'm not taking in anything away from those really smart MD PhDs that come from Harvard and Stanford and great postdocs and fellowships. But you were not taught leadership in school, right? And certain people have leadership traits and others don't. And then, you know, I have found sometimes an inverse equation between EQ, IQ. In our industry, most people are quite smart, very intelligent, high IQ. Sometimes they do not have the EQ to really understand people, teams, how to build them and inspire and get the best out of them and grow and develop those people into the next generation of leaders.
It's really interesting thoughts from you on this, especially with how much founders pour resources into the science. Right? Like you've probably heard that, this is a miracle, whatever the product or platform is.
Yeah.
And it's so true. If you can't build a team around you, it's hard to scale and really make it effective. Where do you think most founders trip up looking through the talent lens at their organizations, even
Yeah.
when they have incredible science?
Yeah, I think what I've seen, probably one of the biggest faults in our industry specifically, right, is that generally, you have a lot of scientific and physician, medical, clinical talent, right? There are a lot of brilliant people out there, and a lot of early stage companies and even larger companies get fixated on the technical capability. Is this person an expert in X, Y, or Z? Did they work in a renowned lab? Did they get a Nature paper published or Cell paper? And they get fixated on that one thing, the technical capability of the person, what they bring to the table technically. Sometimes that works. And my data set tells me it doesn't work a lot of the time because you're taking those people because they're smart and they're experts in the technical aspect of what it is. And those people believe that they certainly know more than everyone else about it. That does not necessitate that they are a good leader or capable of building a company, articulating the messaging around the company, convincing investors, convincing the best workforce to come follow them. I would argue that sometimes they fail at it miserably, right? They hire other people like them that don't have, complementary skill sets that can help them along the way. I learned a long time ago from Mark Levin, the founder of Third Rock. He would say, a sign of a great leader is someone that has the willingness to hire people underneath them that can run the race much quicker than them in each individual race, right? Your job as a leader is to manage those people, inspire those people, set the strategic direction, and have them follow you. And the other fault I see is that some of those technical experts that end up in the leadership positions, they end up trying to do the job of the people, and they're insecure about those people outshining them in their own lanes, and they won't let them win the race.
Such a big problem, right? And to me, building a team is such a core leadership competency. And you've got to let go, and it's really hard to let go. I think we see that a lot with founders, is that letting go can be really, really hard. I'm sure you've seen that as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I've seen is, the start and finish lines are not the same place. So, the originators in a company, whether they're founders or employees, there's different stages in scaling of a company, right? There's like, hey, did we get the science right? Did we build the research platform? Do we have this data set? That doesn't mean those people have the skill set to bring it through the clinical stage and the commercial stage, right? So when people hang on too long or are unwilling to give away the reins to the people that can actually scale the company, uh, you know, there's a lot of issues with that, right? And so the starters are not always the finishers, and if people could get more realistic about themselves, self reflection, look at yourself in the mirror. What are my strengths and weaknesses, and either try and grow towards what you want to be, but let other people, people can hold the companies back, right? They can hold the growth back just because, they either have to be the smartest person in the room or they won't allow for other leaders to mature and grow and shine, right? And so I think that gets in the way a lot of the ways. And the other thing in this industry, I work with a lot of really smart, capable people that have made a lot of inventors of drugs, right? And we have set up Third Rock in more of a democracy where it's a think tank. We call it Group Genius. We believe we get the best thinking out of groups of people that are willing to debate, right? They're willing to debate the topic and they're okay with that debate, and they don't have to be the smartest people in the room all the time, right? So, yeah.
That's a really interesting strategy to really move businesses forward. I think that goes across different industries. That sort of productive debate to get at better outcomes for the business is so key. I think a big missing part of this, like there has to be a foundation of trust between people that are working on these challenges together. Because if there's no trust, they feel like they can't speak up, they can't have a disagreement, and there should be conflict, right? Like you're trying to, especially in your world, you're trying to solve for some really challenging biological problems that are very hard. And if you can't trust the people that you're trying to solve that with, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, which comes right back to the point of hiring correctly, right? We don't always get it right. We make mistakes, right? I think that you make a good point. The trust factor, right? You have to trust that your other team members are doing what they're supposed to do and trust that they're making sound decisions. And if you don't have that level of trust, I'll tell you specifically we hired, each company is different in its formation, but they all, to me, they look similar. They change based on therapeutic area, modality, and team, right? And so that first 20 employees, the culture that's built around them, it has to be built on trust, right? You have limited amount of resource, human capital to get done what seems monumental, right? And if you can't have that level of trust that the next person is as invested as you, and I always say, like, I'm always looking for a lot of, I guess what I would say, character traits first. Like, I know lots of people are like, nope, they have to be this, right? They have to have this technical.
For
Yeah,
sure.
of course they have to know that. But for me, what's important, have you shown throughout your life and your career a level of resilience, grit, and I will, excuse my language, get shit done attitude,
Yeah,
right?
seriously. Yep.
Make it happen, right? you know, and then, are you a genuine human being? Like, what comes out of your mouth is important. Can we trust that it's you? Are you saying one thing in a room and doing something in a different room? Like, it's the human traits, right? It's the humans are complex. And when you put them into groups, it gets even more complex and getting the best out of them, that culture piece and it's based on trust.
It's funny, as I was thinking about the second hot take, the one founder trait that you can't teach was sort of my thought, and I think it might be trust. You can't
Yeah.
teach trust. You can't teach
Nope.
people to trust. They either trust or they don't, and you can't fake trust either. So it's a really interesting component. And I'd like to move to the sort of the next hot take is sort of related to what we're talking about is culture fits need to happen at warp speed. And I think you probably see this in the startup world, right? Where you're scaling from maybe a handful of people, there's 12, 20 people, whatever it is, to then sometimes hundreds or beyond in a very short time frame. And I think a lot of times as companies go through that evolution and growth, they often struggle to maintain what that strong company culture is and what might have really been magical from solving problems with a core group of people that trust each other. How do you maintain some of that culture fit, and how do you spot and course correct when there might be some substantial growth goals that you guys are putting in place for some of the companies that you're incubating?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that we talk about all the time. I mean, I would tell you that the culture of a company is equally as important as whatever it's working on, right? Great cultural companies or companies that have great cultures generally have, I would say, happy employees, right? That want to work there. They will walk through walls to accomplish the goal, right? And that's what you're trying to build. The growth is a challenging one, right? So I've seen generally, in biotech, like, it's a regulated industry and the growth is somewhat predictable based on what is coming out in your data sets and what stage you're at, whether you're research, clinical, commercial. And at each step up, right, the company's getting bigger, right? More functions are being built. Where it gets interesting is when you make those step changes, right? From 50 to 100 to 100 to 200 and 200 to 500 and 500 to 1,000. That's massive, right? And the original people are always fighting for the culture that was, right? Like where everyone had a seat at the table and you could walk down the hall and get the answer. As companies increase, right, there's a level of governance that's put in place because it needs to be there to operate, and which means there is some bureaucracy and not everyone's going to be in every meeting. So it's something you have to watch, right? And I would say it starts with the leadership team again, right? The culture is built from the top down and the bottom up, right? And so if the employees believe in your leadership team and the messaging that you're giving the company, they're going to follow you. If they don't, they're going to leave, right? And so if it's toxic or you allow this is back to what we said in the last segment, I guess. If you allow a bunch of people that are just extraordinarily talented, world renowned expert in X, Y, or Z, but they are negative and they don't treat people well and they're not good leaders, right? You cannot build a culture underneath that, right? That will implode on you eventually. Hence, trying to find leadership teams that actually care about culture. Because we're in a technical domain. Some people care about the science, the technology, and does it work, right? They care about that more than the people, and that doesn't work either. So I think and you have to be very mindful at each stage to keep your eye on the wheel, right? Like, because if you lose it, you're going to see all of your employees at your competitor. You don't want them to be at, right? So it's something that we talk about constantly. Yeah, it's an important topic for sure.
I think this is a product of just, teams growing. There's also a lot of change in the talent market at large that has impacted people making moves in some cases. And it's a much different landscape than it was 2, 3 years ago from a hiring perspective. And I think that has a downstream impact on the culture, especially when you might have been scaling and then there's some stagnation or there's reductions. So I'm curious your take as we kind of move to the hot take number 4. The biotech war for talent is not just Boston. I know you guys have a pretty significant presence on the West Coast. So I'm curious your thoughts on the talent market itself and what you're seeing in the current market.
So great points and great topics. What I would say is that I personally believe this. We have more headwind in our industry today than we ever have in the history of our industry, right? And it's coming from all directions. Interest rates remain high. Generalist investors have left the biotech scene. You have an FDA that is trying to figure itself out with a new administration. We have what some people would refer to as a potential existential threat to the industry with China and their capability that's being built. And then, we have a down market, right? We have a constricting market with a lot of consolidation, still lots of layoffs and companies going out of business. So, it is a very, very challenging environment out there. And we're all trying to solve for it, right? I'm not sure anyone has a real answer for it. Kind of day to day, watching the headlines and see where it's coming. We have, other things, the most favored nation, drug pricing potentially coming, or tariffs coming to the industry. So there's a lot, just a lot going on, right? And so, in a bull market when everything's rosy and sunshine, right? And, there's lots of capital to go around, lots of companies and lots of growth, that's great for when it happened, but it's in our past, and hopefully we'll get there again. I'm optimistic about our industry. Human beings will continue to get sick, and we will always want to get better, right? And we want to see transformative therapies and change patient lives. In order to do that, we need a healthy system, right? And I would argue the system's not so healthy right now, and hopefully we get better again. So in this down market, right, the growth is going to be a lot different. What we're experiencing, and I think we're going to see this a lot for the next 5 years. What we were doing for the last 10 of let's raise $100 million and hire 50 people and build this research platform and see if it works or not. And then let that grow to 200 or whatever, and that would be an overgrowth of a biotech that's not in the clinic, right? And so now, because of the China capability, you're going to see potentially a lot of outsourcing from the US to China or India or somewhere else, right? More than we used to see. You're also going to see, and we're seeing this, funding has been cut at a lot of academic institutions, and a lot of the foreign PhD, MD students at our institutions are no longer choosing to go to US-based companies. They can go live in their mainland China, be closer to their families, and work in those companies, right? So we're seeing a bit of a brain drain there a bit, which is going to affect us as well. So lots of things that have changed. And one of the things that changed is everyone's being more pragmatic about their growth. When I say virtual, what we used to do with 50 people, we may do with 20 now, right? So you're going to let the data tell you should grow versus grow before you get the data. And that's what was being done before. So I would tell you, every biotech, every VC out there, we are all scrutinizing our hires more than you could ever think of. Right? But in the bear market, what happened, and I guess I hope people will heed this advice. I saw what I would call bad behaviors. Right? We have an inflated market, we have inflated titles, inflated compensation. We have people racing. Right? This industry is a regulated industry, and doing a couple revolutions in it, underneath great leadership and mentors who are going to teach you stuff, so you have battle scars and scar tissues that would then inform and give you intuition around your decision making, is the way that people should have been thinking. But what they were doing is trying to race up the ladder. Can I get more money and a bigger title and expanded remit without learning how to lead people, right? And
So true.
right, it's
Yeah.
just a mismatch. And I would argue that if you get out over your skis, and now lots of people are in this environment, they're losing their jobs, we're not going to hire those people, right? It's that you're looking for the gems that have proven track records. And this is stuff is hard. I'm not just talking about drug approvals. We want to know that you've been mentored by great people in great companies, that you've picked up some knowledge base and you have some scar tissue. Guess what? It's okay to fail a few times. You learn from that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
No one gets it right all the time. You have to, hopefully, over your career, if you're lucky enough to work in, one or two companies that makes a drug, I mean, that's very successful, right? And that's a career, 20, 30 years of this, right? And so I'm hopeful this will help the psychology of decision making for candidates just change a little bit of like, it is more important to work for the right people who are teaching you the right stuff, because later on in life, you will get the bigger roles and more compensation because you learned something versus race through. And then, someone figured out, I mean, a lot of smart people they will figure out that you don't have the skill set real quick, right? When I say war and peace, we're in a war zone.
Wartime.
And
Yep.
yeah, and if you're not prepared for the war, you're going to probably be an unfortunate data point.
I'm curious your take on a question I'm asked a lot from folks, especially folks that I talk to that are in the HR space, that are always interested in breaking into biotech and sort of pivoting from outside of the industry. And I'm curious your reaction and or suggestions to folks that might be interested in making that pivot. Love your reaction to that.
Yeah. So my first reaction is be willing to step back, right? Have a willingness to step back. What I mean by that is title and compensation, right? To be direct. Unless, of course, you're in a G&A function. G&A functions from company to company. There are certain skills that you can apply to industrials or tech or biotech, right? Finance and administration operations, sometimes like that. On the technical side, right? Like unfortunately, if you didn't get a PhD in molecular biology, you're probably not going to make that pivot.
Right. Tough one to get into.
But I will say this. I mean, there's something to be said for people that have the lexicon already, right? A lot of people, recruiters will take the path of least resistance. You know, I'll just go to the other 5 biotechs that had those people and I'll hire them first. You know, I I guess I may have a different view, and that would probably just apply to G&A because again, you're not going to come into our industry unless, maybe in sales and stuff like that. But I'm talking about the research and development side of this,
Right. Yeah.
unless
You
you
need that
have,
subject matter expertise to get
yeah.
in.
I prefer scrappy, gritty, get shit done, listen more than you speak. I'm talking about like the earlier generation of people, the younger people that have a willingness to just do whatever it takes. If you can hire people like that really have the mission and they're really, really passionate about whatever the company is trying to do, um, and they're eager to learn and they're a good teammate, right? They can get along with other people. Like those are the people that are going to have a better shot, right? They're just going to have a better shot at this. It transitions from industry to industry are quite difficult, as you know. Yeah. So, I would say, listen, networking, become an expert in it, right? Don't be afraid to reach out to people. Use your personal networks, right? That's the best way in for you to try and change industries and submit your resume through a website. That's probably not going too far.
And it really is all about relationship and yeah, making those connections and a willingness to I think it takes some vulnerability to recognize if you want to get into something and that something is a little bit outside of your comfort zone and what you've done, you have to be willing to make some sacrifices to do it. So I think that's great advice. I'd love to talk our 5th hot take to talk about everybody's favorite new hire is AI and what you're seeing in your space at Third Rock and on your team, right? I mean, I think AI with the efficiency in recruiting, automation is so fascinating. I mean, it's mind blowing. Anytime I go to an in person AI program, the room is packed. But we both know in our world, both in recruiting and building teams, that the human touch is so critical, especially in some of the high stakes scenarios that you guys are in. But AI is everywhere. So I'm curious what you're seeing and how it's moving the needle for you guys, where you see it going. I love your reaction to that because that's clearly on everybody's mind.
Yeah, no. So AI will truly change the world, right? It is a big topic across all industries. It will change our lives our individual lives for sure. Like anything that's novel and new, right? It takes time to mature. I call it, and others would refer to it. There's a hype cycle, right? So there is this, okay, here's this new thing. It's going to change everything, right? And lots of money and investment goes into it. And then you realize, how do you apply this to any given business or sector, and what does it mean for that sector? In biotech, it's complicated, right? So I don't believe we've got to the point yet where AI overly productive in predicting or validating novel targets that we can drug in human beings. That's where we want to get to, right? So as an industry, if we can figure out the biology and the pathway of a disease and the mechanism, how it works. And we can do that using AI modeling,
Mm,
which is the
yep.
goal, right? That's the goal. We're not there yet. We will get there. It's exponential growth. We talk about it every day. Every new project I work with at Third Rock comes to me and tells me the data and AI machine learning needs of this project is greater than anything we've ever done at Biotech. And I have to
Wow.
remind them, I've done this a couple of times. The last guy that was in my office said the same thing to me. So, but it's going to change, right? A lot of our industry right now. So the original AI machine learning companies that came out, there's now some of them being acquired. Many of them, had to build out their platforms for 5 years. And what we're all waiting for is when their novel algorithms predict whether these targets can be drugged better than our traditional drug discovery efforts had been doing them. AI modeling in biotech is it's only as good as the model, the data that you put into the model, right? So if we don't know the right questions to ask about the biology, it's hard to build a predictive model, and we're getting better at it. So I would just say in 5 years and 10 years, our industry will have changed so dramatically in 10 years because of what AI's capability as it increases in our industry will do. And we should have much better outcomes, which means we should have better drugs and more of them for patients in need. And it's going to be huge. But we're on the slope, right? The hype cycle, lots of money. Then you hit the ceiling. You have to figure out some problems and how to get to the summit, right? And that's where we're on our way to.
It's fascinating, right? You think about the predictive analytics and recommendations that AI is going to be able to make. Like, am I going to be able to upload my blood labs, and what insights is it going to give us in five
Yeah.
years? Is really remarkable.
Well, it's Andrew, it's interesting. I know you have, a young son. Like when that guy is 20, I can't even imagine what the world will look like for him, right? Like, it is going to be dramatically different because of AI, and we'll probably have moved on to like the third or fifth generation by
I know.
then.
It's really amazing. And so are you leveraging AI in your workflow on your team with some of the build outs and the recruiting? And are you guys leveraging that in your daily work?
Yeah, we're starting to. My team and I talk about AI. I just had this conversation. We talk a lot about what are the tools we want to implement. We're kind of waiting for a level of maturity, and we have, a number of firms around us trying different stuff. And we're, me and other venture firms are talking a lot about like how do you apply this to recruiting. Um, and I was giving an example the other day of like I cannot wait for the day that I can talk to my computer and say, who are the most successful oncology drug developers that have made, uh, a lymphoma drug and that have more than 20 INDs registered with the FDA and a drug approval or something like that. And it just kind of gives me the names. Right now, you're like, that's hours of time, right? And institutional knowledge to get to that point. We will get there, right? I'm looking for, you know, our friends at LinkedIn to come out with something to, to make it easier, and I don't know, like I'm just waiting for it, right? I'm trying to see where it's going to go before I just invest into it, but it's going to change. I mean, I do believe in 2 years we will have something in the recruiting field that will make our jobs a lot more efficient. The
Yeah.
one thing that I remind my team, this is a human connection business. So don't worry about losing your jobs because until AI models can talk to people and understand their wants and needs and passions, recruiters are going to be in business.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, right? It's like, would you ever take a job if the only person you talk to was the agentic AI recruiter? There's just
Never,
no way. You would
no,
never do that.
never,
You wouldn't
never would
lose you
I.
wouldn't leave your job to having not
Nope.
talked to any of the people, right? And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Solving problems with really smart people is so fulfilling, especially when you trust those people. But in a process to get into those organizations, it just I think it lacks trust if it's
Yeah,
own if that candidate experience is very AI forward.
right. And, until you can, I don't know, maybe we'll get there one day, but humanize AI in a way that, it's, authentic. And I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but face to face meetings and, dialogue, building the trust, when you're interviewing, it's interesting, you're sizing each other up, right? Some people, I guess, maybe just focus on what's the role and how much money. I would say that's not the smartest way to go about it, but I know everyone thinks differently. What I'm looking for in people and or what I suggest people look for is what am I going to get out of this outside of my paycheck? Does this get me to the goal? Is it going to expand me in the future? Am I going to learn here or am I going to show up and sit at my desk and collect my paycheck?
It's amazing where it's going to go, and we'll have to compare some notes, Chris, on some of the AI stuff, and love to hear what you guys are doing on from the science lens. Just a quick lightning round of some stuff to get your quick
Yeah.
reaction. A lot of kids are going back to school right now. College is back in session. Folks are moving in. What's the fastest growing biotech role or skill that you might encourage some of those students to consider as you guys are looking ahead in the talent landscape?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I guess, if you're really truly passionate about science and medicine, taking a track in school where you can apply that. I think just based on what we talked about, the virtualization and a lot of outsourcing, potentially going outside, right, would be in the clinical side of things, right? Like, so young college grads, nursing degrees is a smart thing, right? Like you can take a nursing degree and go into clinical trials and become a CRA and a clinical trial manager and kind of grow up that way. Manufacturing's coming back to the US, right? In a significant way, right? So, that's going to take technical capabilities. On the manufacturing side, you don't need to go get a PhD. I mean, some people do in manufacturing, so I don't want an overarching statement there, but you can grow in different segments. And those are the two fields, like, so preclinical, clinical to commercialization and the how do we actually make the stuff, right? Those are two interesting areas. The research side, it's, again, you have to probably get some advanced degrees on the research end of this to really advance. But, it's a great industry. And then, sales and marketing, right? We need people that other people will buy stuff from, right? And that is a human relationship. Can you articulate the benefit of whatever we're selling? And, those types of skills, and they can be applied from anywhere. In those fields, you're looking for competitive people with drive. They want to win all the time, but they all have to be, again, trustworthy, authentic, genuine, grit, get shit done attitude. I personally don't care if you went to Harvard or Stanford or anywhere else. It's what you can do after, right? I talk to lots of people all the time that have gone to Ivy League schools or wherever else. And, I know lots of people that didn't, that are way more successful. So I don't, those labels, I guess it's important, and I'm not putting any academic institution down, but I do believe it's what you do after you leave school. Like, do you have the DNA that is, I'm a hardworking, trustworthy person that listens and I'm a good teammate, which comes down to, I guess everything in life, right? Your hockey teammates, you want them that way, right, Andrew?
It's just that you do it anyway. I was something earlier I was watching. It was I don't feel like getting up today and, going for my run. I do it anyway. And just that I love the grit and resilience and just kind of finding whatever it is you're passionate about, right? So if you're a student and you have an interest in being in the oncology space, to pursue that, but not just from an academic standpoint, right? To actually make a difference in moving the needle, it is about that grit and the resilience and being around other people that want to run, right? It's you
Yeah.
get better as using your hockey analogy. I want to play where I'm not the best player. I want to be surrounded by people that are pushing and want to increase their skill set, because everybody wins, right? The whole bar gets raised for everybody. I think that's great advice. What a lot. I'm sure I got a lot of folks that are always curious if there's good book, book recommendation, podcast, things that have shaped sort of your talent, your business philosophy. Any good recommendations of things that come to mind for folks?
Yeah. So as Andrew, I'm a military guy. I'm a former Marine. I guess I'm always a Marine, but the David Goggins series,
Oh, fantastic!
David, yeah, again, grit, right? You can
Literally
go
the most
from,
gritty guy I think I've ever seen.
yeah, you can go from nothing, the worst circumstances in life possible, right? To being extraordinary if you can get your mental state right. Right. And so I can't say enough about grit and resilience. We all get knocked down in life. It's who gets up and fights again.
Are you doing cold plunges, Chris? Like Goggin style? Do you have a
You
cold
know
plunge
what?
at home?
Our offsite leadership offsite next month, that happens to be one of the hypothermic bath thing to cold plunge series that you can do as an activity.
Nothing to build team like risking hypothermia and
Yeah.
cryogenically freeze you. That brings people together as a team. It's great. That's awesome. Any other surprising lesson from working with startups, folks that are just getting into the landscape, and maybe your best advice for those folks?
Yeah. I think, again, it's on this whole topic of work for the right people, right? Quality companies and quality leaders is more important than anything as you start your career. And I would say as you advance your career. So it's not always about, I have a title or I get paid more. Eventually, I promise you, if you work for the right people, they will take you on a ride that will allow you to get the jobs you want in the future. My advice is slow down. It's not a race. Go work, learn, and listen. And I guess those are my key piece of advice for anyone at any level.
That's fantastic. And last but not least, what's the next song that we're playing before our next Cranberry Cup hockey game when we're finally hopefully lacing up the skates again?
Yeah,
What's
I,
playing on
I
the
think it's
speaker?
Consuelo.
Down at Consuelos. It does get the people going, and have,
That
have
it
have
does.
have so much fun with that. Love the conversation today, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing the valuable insights on building these teams, your thoughts in the biotech space. Really awesome conversation. Thank you so much again
Yeah, it
for
was a pleasure. It was a pleasure being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on the podcast.
love it. All right, till next time,
All right.
folks. Thanks for tuning in to Talent Take 5. We'll see you.
Thank you.
I'm the one you should be giving your attention to.